This past Shabbat, we read Parshat Bereshit, and tonight I'm going to give a little review of the first day, Yom Echad. Bereshit bara Elokim et hashamayim et haaretz. In the beginning of God's creating the heaven and the earth. So, the first word, Bereshit, is in the beginning, Beit, in, and Reshit, beginning. The first, oftentimes, that is translated as bara, creating, Elokim, which I'm pronouncing incorrectly since I'm not laning, that is God, eight hashamayim, the eight haaretz. So the heavens and the earth, and eight is like a definitive before those. So some people will translate this as in the beginning God created. Rashi translates it as in the beginning of God's creating. So that is being translated as a current rather than past. My take on that is that, well, God's still creating. So, God's beyond time. So, if you say it in the past, well, he, created, however long ago it was, 13, 15 billion years ago, if this is referring to the Big Bang. So, the beginning, well, the beginning is when he decided to create this universe, let's say. And because he's outside of time, he had to kind of create time, too. So, really, he was creating, and he's still creating because he's outside of time. At least that's the way I look at it. So, Hashemayim, or Shemayim, could be translated as there is water. Mayim is the word for water. So, he's creating water, well, we'll just say it's a liquid, and then haaretz, the earth. Aretz also often refers to the land, as in Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel. So I'm going to say that's solid. So he's creating liquid and solid. And then the second verse, v'haaretz haita tohu vavohu. So the earth was astonishingly empty. I don't think that's a very good translation there. So, tohu, astonishingly, and vohu, empty. So this vohu, this emptiness, it's like a real palpable emptiness. But tohu, I don't really think is like a modifier, astonishingly empty, because it's tohu va vohu, like tohu and vohu. So what does that mean? So if we go take a look at the Midrash, they talk about tohu is a green line around the globe from which darkness emanates. As it is said, he made darkness a secret place surrounding him. That's from Tehillim 18, verse 11. Vohu are mighty rocks in the depth which bring forth water. As it is said, this is from Yeshayahu, Isaiah the prophet, and he stretches out upon it the line of tohu and the stones of vohu. So tohu creates darkness, and vohu creates water. Okay, so the earth had this tohu stuff which creates darkness, and the vohu stuff, which creates water. Well, we've got the water already, the hashemayim. There's water there. That's the heavens. So then we say, v'hoshek al pnei tahom. So now there's this darkness upon the surface of the deep. Pnei also sometimes means face. So, well, this tohu creates the hoshek. Astonishingly, I don't know. Okay, so we've got this hoshek now, and it's on the surface of the tahom. Pronounced, talking about the deep. Not really sure what that really means. It's obviously, something that probably, Kabbalistic. I think all these things are kind of Kabbalistic, creation, who knows. So we've got the Hoshek, which was apparently created from Tohu, and it's on the face of the deep. Varuch Elokim Merachepet al Pnei Hamayim. And the Ruach, the presence of God, hovered on the surface. We'll, say Pnei is surface rather than face. Same thing. Of the waters. Okay, well, we got the water, Shemayim, there's water there. So we've got the waters, and we've got the presence of God hovering on the water. So Ruach doesn't necessarily always mean presence. It can also mean wind. So hey, wait, this is now our gas. So we already talked about, we got the mayim, the liquids. We've got the aretz, the solids, and then we're talking now about this gas, we'll call it, of God that was hovering on the water. So that's kind of interesting there. So let's just talk about the state of matter. Well, we have atoms. So, God created these atoms, subatomic particles, however he made the atoms. But generally, if we will talk about water, hydrogen and oxygen, and we can just talk about those two substances, they are gases by themselves generally. Then they come together and now they're a liquid. But that also has to do with temperature. As the temperature cools, they become a liquid, and then as the temperature cools further, they become a solid. And now anything out there, any of these atoms, will be a gas, a liquid, or solid, depending on how hot things are, or how cold things are. So we have the mayim being the water, we have the aretz being the solid, which, similar stuff, maybe we'll throw some carbon in there, some nitrogen. Carbon and nitrogen, they can be gases too, but, you get them cold enough, now you're going to have some solids there, and that's going to, form some kind of planet, the Earth, the aretz. So that's the solids there. And now the water, did it come first, or did the gas come first? That's a good question. So we have these atoms, and, they can kind of go either way, because we've got the ruach on the surface of the water. So did the ruach come first and then it kind of got a little colder and now we got the water? Or did the water come first and it got a little hotter and we had the ruach? Now, based on some physics, I'm going to kind of think that maybe the ruach came first, because another aspect of a gas versus a liquid is the atoms are further apart. So really, maybe what happened is these atoms, they were like really far apart. I mean, you talk about the Big Bang, you say it's like this little, infinitely small mass. It was like the mass of everything. I mean, that would be like the solid of all solids, the pinpoint black hole. But let's just say that really we've kind of got whatever's kind of coming in, these atoms, and maybe they're just so far apart, physically, they came to exist. But before that, they were existing spiritually. And we talk about spiritual realm. Well, things, in essence, would be so physically far apart spiritually, because it's really not part of the physical. It's also beyond time. So maybe they were just so spread out, and then they kind of came together. And, these atoms eventually get close enough to each other, and now they associate with each other and become a gas. Because if they're not a gas, they're just atoms kind of hanging out there, maybe ions. They've got some charges and their electrons and whatnot, but they come together a little more, get a little colder, now they're liquid, come together a little bit more, now they're solid. But anyway, maybe the water came first. I couldn't tell you. I'll leave that to someone who knows some serious Kabbalah to tell me. So the next verse, Vayomer Elokim Yehi Or Vahi Or. So now, God says, let there be light, and there was light, or. So is or a gas, a liquid, or solid? I mean, I kind of don't think it's either of those. I mean, some people say it's a particle, Some people say it's a ray, like a wave. It's kind of different. It's kind of something different. So, this light came apparently after the dark, the Hoshek. So it seems there's this really palpable darkness first. So the light isn't, darkness isn't just the absence of light, but they're like two distinct things, apparently. So we had this darkness that came from the Tohu, and then we have this Or, this light. And I'm not going to get into the typical thing that everyone says, that there was a very special light, and God hid it away for the Tzaddikim. That's a pretty standard Rashi. Everyone talks about that. I'll just continue. Vayar Elokim et haor ki tov, vayavdel Elokim bein or uvein hachoshek. So we'll start with the first part. So God saw et haor, this light, ki tov, it was good. Ki tov is like, it's like for it was good. Not like it was very good. Very good would be tov ma'od, but it's good. Didn't say that about the Hoshek though. So maybe the Or is like better than the Hoshek. He created the Hoshek, then he created the Or. He's like, nah, this stuff is ki tov. The Hoshek, not so sure about that stuff. And then God separated between the Or and between the Hoshek, between the light and the darkness. So wait a minute, he created the Hoshek, the dark, this palpable darkness. Then he created the Or, the light, and again, it was like a very special kind of light. It was, a palpable light, we'll say. So they were like mixed up. They weren't separated. I don't know. Again, Kabbalistic stuff. I'll leave that to someone else who can explain that. Vayikra Elokim Laor Yom V'Lachoshek Kara Lila. So then God called the light Yom, which is day, and he called the darkness night. So now he's creating time. So before all this, time didn't exist. Remember, I said that at the beginning. That's why, God, he's like still creating, because, he started creating, or he was always creating. I mean, it's outside time. You can't really use past, present, and future to talk about his creating that he was doing. So this whole time, there's no time, and now he just created time. So he separated the Hoshek from the Or, and then he's creating the time with calling it Yom and Lila, day and night. So in the Jewish calendar, when we have a new day, we actually start with night first and then the day. We don't start at midnight. We start at sundown. That's a new day. So we have the night first and then the day. Well, which makes sense because the Hoshek came first before the Or. So even though he first called seemingly the Or Yom, and then he called the Hoshek Lila, well, it would seem that since the Hoshek was created before the Or, that's why there's night first and then there's day. And then we say Vahi Erev, Vahi Voker, Yom Echad. There was evening and there was morning, one day. So now there's Erev and there's Voker, or usually by itself we just call it Boker. So that's evening and morning. So we've got Hoshek and Or, we've got Lila and Yom, and we've got Erev and Boker. So, sometimes people talk about these things, and it can be used interchangeably. Lila, it's night, and Erev is evening. I guess Erev is like, it's like becoming evening. It's like the early evening. You don't really call midnight evening. But he doesn't talk, we don't hear about anything between the Erev and the Boker. So, really, maybe it is evening until it is sunrise or until dawn. And then Yom, day, and, Boker is morning. Generally, once it's like the afternoon, and, it's not going to be called Boker. But you notice also it's Yom Echad. it's not Lila Echad or Lila and the Yom Echad. So, I mean, the Or and the Yom is kind of Kitov. It's getting the love. And it seems like the Hoshek and the Lila is not quite Kitov. It's fine. Nothing wrong with it. It's certainly not raw. It's not bad. But seems the Or is better. The Yom is better. We call it Yom Echad. So that is pretty much my quick review. I don't know how quick it was on the Parsha of last Shabbat. And that's about as much as I've got on this, because there's a lot more in this Parsha. Pretty heavy-duty stuff. I mean, we're talking about creation of the universe here, and where everything began, Bereshit. Anyway, that's about all I got.